Welcome to this week's episode. I'm so excited to have another guest with me today, Miss Jessica Rylee. And this woman is on fire. I don't think there's anything she can't do, but I'm excited for you to learn about her magic today. Jessica is a certified breathwork facilitator, and she helps people access their self-source power through the breath so they can achieve embodied liberation. I really like that. Embodied liberation, inner alignment, and increase their quality of life. Breathwork has been an incredible healing tool for Jessica over the last 3 years, and her mission is to bring this work to as many people as she can in this lifetime. Well, I think that's a beautiful way to welcome you in, say hello, and kick the conversation off. Like, why breathwork, and
Mm.
what kind of impact did it have in your life?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm so excited to be here. So why breathwork? I grew up like I started my personal development journey when I was like 19, so very young. My friends, I was still going out and partying and doing all the things, but on my downtime, I was reading the self-help books. I was, journaling, and I kind of like I've always tried for since I was 19 for like 10 years probably or 8 years. I've tried to meditate. Meditation never worked for me. My brain just could not shut off. And so when I was introduced to breath work, my very first breathwork experience, I didn't have any thoughts. It literally was like my brain shut off for the first time in years. And I had such a profound, like, inner shift of my energy that it kind of sent me down like a rabbit hole of the what, the why, and the how of breathwork. And within like the last 3 years, I've really been using breathwork to help me with my own anxiety. I was diagnosed with anxiety when I was about 14, and immediately I was put on anti-anxiety medication, which through my, teenage years and early adult years, I was kind of numbed to all of the stress and the anxiety. And so when I came off of my medication, I was feeling all of the things all at once, and I didn't know what that meant. And so breathwork was really an amazing tool to just kind of help me come back into my body and really work intentionally with the breath in order to calm my nervous system and work with my anxiety rather than against it. So that's kind of like why I chose breathwork, is because I feel like I'm one of those people who I'm like, I've tried everything, and breathwork was my thing. And it kind of just, yeah, came into my life, and it found me. I didn't find it.
And I think that's what happens. Things tend to find us when we start to ask the question. And it's the question we didn't really like pinpoint was so simple. And how can I be better? Who
Mm.
am I? What's going on with this? And it's that inner, like, no matter what's going on now, this isn't it for me. Something more has got to be there. And I think that the breadcrumbs come in, right? If we're willing to really open up, we can look back on the journey and think, I don't know how I got here, but all the things that were a part of that are a part of me now. And it's so important because it set us free, I think, to be more of who we are, to remember who we are without being the stress, the overwhelm, the shoulds, need tos, have tos of life. And my gosh, at 14, I'm thinking my daughter's just turning 19, and she was in that COVID era. And so many of the kids have anxiety, but don't really even know what anxiety is. But then they look on the internet and they get defined what anxiety is. And then they set that identity. And now it exacerbates because they feel these feelings that they're not used to feeling in the body. So I couldn't imagine at 14 being put on anti-anxiety medication
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
a, right. And not for any other reason than I just didn't know any better. Right.
Yeah. And knowing back then, like what I know now about anxiety, that was not anxiety. I was literally just a stressed out teenager because I was, in going into high school, going into whatever. And like my anxiety was actually 100 times worse when I came off of the medication because I, again, didn't have those. I had the external tools, but I didn't have the internal tools to help me regulate through those emotions. And yeah, it's very interesting, like how you said that kind of becomes your identity when you're younger. I identified with I am anxious. I am anxious, right? And it wasn't until I kind of learned how to work with my anxiety, because I've always worked against it. And I would be really hard on myself, and I would be really mean to myself because I was anxious. And I was like, why can't you just do better? Why can't you be better? Why are you like this? But then breath work, what that does is it kind of like opens up this whole new world of self-acceptance and self-love and self-trust. And although I'm still working on those things, it's showing me parts of myself that I am grateful for, and I can show myself more compassion when I am in those states, right? So yeah, it's a cool journey that I've been on. I feel like I've gone through a lot.
In a short time, right?
Yeah.
And at such a young age. And so many words wanted to come out of my mouth at one time in that moment. It's powerful because now you get to go for the next decades with this wisdom moving forward. Just like my girls have learned what they've learned, and then whether they resisted listening to mom or not going through my journey, something stuck. And so they're finding their resources, they're finding their other way. And it's really powerful. I think we all do that in a way, but maybe don't always know the definition of it. But when we can be very intentional and understand the shifts that are happening in our body, when I first felt it after 40 plus years of not knowing the difference, I was just like, oh my gosh, where have I been?
Yeah.
Right? The
Yeah.
fact that you can literally change your state of being internally, and yet it's the very same thing we're taught to run from, to not slow down, to not tune in. And I think of just the millions of people who think that normal is being in the rat race, going super fast, forcing through things. We're having conversations in my group program this past week around self-care after we've unraveled the patterns, which is what I feel like breath work illuminates for you. This is the pattern that doesn't define you. It's just the habit that's been created that can be shifted. And we don't always see what we don't see until we bring to light what we want more of and what we're not doing. And so there's this moment of truth that I think we avoid. And that's that resistance that you were talking about. And I feel like we feel the resistance and then we run from it. It doesn't feel good. We don't want to be the reason
Yeah.
for
And
the crazy.
that's why a lot of people too, they don't start personal development, is because it's a hard journey. Like it's not an easy thing to go through. You have to like really look at yourself in all its vulnerability and all of its pain, and you have to sit with that
And
and
love
and
it and love you.
love it at the same time,
And
right?
my resistance, I don't know about you, but my resistance was like, I knew how to beat myself up. I knew how to berate. I knew how to like punish and push. I didn't know how to be soft and loving. And so
Mhm.
that's its own shift. Most of the discomfort came from that because it didn't feel quote unquote normal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so many things I wrote down. It was like the internal tools of regulation you knew on the outside. We can read the books, we can get the tools, but unless we know what it feels like to actually integrate it, and then what the actual transmutation feels like while we're in integration, that is not the place where it feels like rainbows and sunshine. That's
Yeah.
the awareness.
Yeah.
The work is sitting in the transmutation, knowing that something better is coming. This is moving through because you were able to witness and be with it. And
Mhm.
what I love about your breath work is one, how much you've made it your own, because I've taken a couple different breath works and it was really also anxiety producing to try to breathe in a way that someone's telling you, breathe in this way. And my
Yeah.
body didn't want to breathe that way, or I couldn't breathe fully. And then you start focusing on the short breath. The way you integrate everything with music and just your style, it's spacious. It gives room for the movement through the resistance, because that's the only way we get through these things. So
Thank
you
you.
want to
Yeah.
speak more to the discovery of that for yourself?
Yeah. Like the discovery of like the way that I do things kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how it
So
came.
yeah, so I have also been to a lot of breathwork activations online. And I've noticed that a lot of them are just the music. And I've also noticed that it's hard for me to, do the belly chest release kind of breath if I'm not guided through it. And so I really wanted to give people something that really drops them in. So how I do it is like the first two or three songs are really just about the breath. It's nothing else. It's like, let's focus on the breath, because after 10 minutes, that's when the blood flow is temporarily shut up or temporarily slowed down to the prefrontal cortex, and that's when your ego mind stops working. That's when your thinking mind shuts off. And so the first like 10 minutes of every breathwork activation is really just getting into the breath to allow for that, so that we can move forward in the journey with the intention of the breathwork journey. So throughout the breathwork, I give little prompts to help you access those deeper states of your being, and help you access the memories and the trauma and the stuck energy that's wanting to be released, so that eventually we can release. And then at the climax, is what it's called, the fastest part of the journey, that's when we let out a somatic release. So whether that's shaking, whether that's a big scream, like the scream is my absolute favorite part. Every single time I lead this in person and I get people to scream, it's like the entire room is vibrating, and I almost like cry every single time, because it's such a powerful thing. And I've had people say, like, after that scream, that's when everything kind of released, and then you kind of come back into your body. And then the last part of the breath work is just the integration and the grounding, and really just coming back home to who you are without all of that stuckness, all of that stagnant energy, because it's now released, right? So yeah, it's just, I think like why mine is so different is because it takes you through an actual journey, and it takes you through the process of it. Everybody's journey is different too. Like, I've been through journeys where it's just music, and I've been through journeys where it's super guided, and I've had completely the same experience, and then I've also had completely different. So it really is depending on what's in your body and what needs to be released.
Yeah, I love that too because one, what was going through my head when you were talking about the screaming piece is that permission.
Oh,
We're not given permission to use our voice or to
uh,
be loud or to do anything out of the box,
yeah.
right?
And it's funny too, because like the first in-person session that I led, nobody screamed. I always scream, because that's permission for you to scream, right? So if one other person is screaming, I would feel more comfortable screaming. So I always scream at that part. But what I've started telling people is like getting them to affirm in their head as they're breathing, like, it is safe for me to be loud. It is safe for me to be heard. It is safe for me to be seen. Because I think that's why like people don't want to let that out, is because they feel so, I don't want to use the word like insecure, but they don't feel comfortable enough with themselves and with the space around them in order to see that, in order to be that vulnerable, right? So it's, oh, so good.
We get in the habit of what other people think too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, oh my gosh, what will people think if I'm the loudest or, it can be anything that
yeah.
gets
What
that's
if
like,
my voice cracks? What if no one else
I don't
screams?
do it right, right? Like all the
Like, what if it's like the most ugly scream that I've ever screamed? I was actually in a breath work. I was doing, yeah, like I was in a breath work online, and it was like my third time doing it. So I understood the assignment. But when the scream came, I let out this like the ugliest, just most like dragony like like scream ever. It was like, I was like, that was gross, but it felt so good. And I was
it's
able,
primal, right? Like
yeah.
I'm, I'm thinking of these times I've gone on retreat and they've had us ohm or and I was like, the newbie going, we're drinking the Kool-Aid. Like, okay, fine, I'll just ohm. But really, that's that internal permission. That's the surrender, right? But my gosh, how awesome when you can let yourself be in that space, how it really does expand an experience of yourself that you didn't know you could have.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was going through was this physical somatic, like when we can drop into the body and we can move it and we can speak it and shake it and use this tool, right? How
Mhm.
it starts to really integrate that much more in a way that we don't even think about,
Mhm.
right? So we had a Tony Robbins free weekend over this last weekend, and there was a lot of times where when he was speaking, because it was online or Zoom, he'd have people get up, shake, move, make noise, right? And I was just watching and witnessing how quiet we really are in our
Mhm.
own experience, right? Even if no one's in the house, to actually let yourself like dance around and be big, and you always find a way to be like, I don't know if I need to do that
Like,
right.
what if someone's actually listening?
Is it really that important?
Yeah.
But that's how constricted we get in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And It's just fun. It's fun to experience those parts of ourselves that when we give
Mhm.
that space for retreat, for a class, for an experience where we can create that internal safety, then we
Yeah.
get to explore parts of ourselves that we didn't even realize existed or were denied or were even unloved, right? It's this opportunity to keep expanding our awareness and our experience because
Mhm.
we're never there. You won't hit
Yeah.
the, like you have that easy button.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no there button. Oh, I made it. I don't have to do that ever again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And like going back to, allowing yourself to move, allowing yourself to express yourself, the more that we restrict ourselves, the more restricted we are.
Right.
And in not just like within our bodies, but within the anxiety, like the anxiety will get louder,
Yes.
the self-hate will get louder. And if your body is saying like, I really feel like dancing right now. I've always had a struggle with dancing. Like I don't know what it is, but I am a shaker. Like whenever someone's like, okay, we're just gonna dance it out, I'm just like shaking like crazy. And they're like, that what's that dance move? I'm like, I don't know, but it feels good.
Practice where she's just like,
Right? Yeah. So it's really important because I have experienced holding back on those screams or those opportunities of movement. And then after, I don't feel any better because I haven't allowed it, I
yeah,
haven't allowed it to flow. So
yes.
full permission if you're listening to this to move your body and scream as much as you want.
Well, I love it too. Let's talk about anxiety for a second. And of course, my head goes right to numbers and the numerology around the numbers. Um, it's just what I do. And I think of the three. And when the three is present, we have this idea and then we meet with a resource or a partnership or a connection to what we want more of. Well, the next part is creating and then choosing how we're going to create. Are we going to create in anxiety or are we going to create in love? And the three is always representative of that frustration, that anxiety, that worry that can be a pattern and a habit. And through the numbers, we can remind ourselves too that what is it we want to create and love because we can't have both. And
Mhm.
so just having studied the numbers in numerology, I always come back to that. And fun fact, it's like a 3 energy day. So you can feel when we're in those swings of, am I starting my day off anxious? What are the things? When can we come back to ourselves and realize there's another tool, another way for us to experience something different than what we've always experienced? And with anxiety, I'm not trying to like diminish it at all, but once I learned that, something switched in my brain to just be like, oh, I don't have to choose the anxiety if I can just go back to what I'm not creating and getting truthful with myself. So,
Yeah.
what do
Yeah.
you
And
think
like my anxiety too, it comes from it really comes from not feeling safe in my body, which
about?
breathwork has helped me bring that realization out. Because for the longest time, I was like, why am I feeling like this? Like, I don't understand. And so when I can either like with the breathwork or without the breathwork, really just drop into a space of like, I am so safe, it's almost like it immediately goes away.
Yeah,
And it's so powerful, like the power that your mind has over that.
absolutely.
My anxiety is, yeah, not feeling safe in my body, and also like anxiety about having anxiety,
Mhm.
right? So it's like coming on podcast interviews. Like it's not so much now anymore because I have worked with it so much, but coming on podcast interviews, being like, oh, am I going to have an anxiety attack on here? And then I'm anxious the whole time, anticipating that. And so I just have to remind myself, like, I am so safe. Like, even before I came on here, I was like, Michele is a safe space. That's all I said. Michele is a safe space because that's reminding my ego, reminding my anxiety that, like, I'm freaking good. Like it's not,
Hard
it's
things, right? Like, well,
yeah,
and it's really powerful because it is through that new evidence that we can retell a different story,
yeah,
right? We can see where the pattern is. And I get that too, because I've grew up very anxious and there are times still I'll wake up from sleep and it'll feel like it did when everything was falling apart or when business was really stressful and I had to work all hours, I thought, right? And
mhm,
so my body still has the habit. And it's my job to take that reaction and just say, oh, we're good. I love you. Thanks for showing me. Let me pour a little bit more love in here
yeah,
and let me be the safety space because I'm the one who creates it. And
mhm,
it wasn't always that. It didn't just happen like that for me. I had, there's a lot of, when you go through personal development and spiritual development, you go through a lot of ebbs and flows. And it's about not looking outside of you for that solution, but knowing that it's here. And so if you ever want to know where that level of safety is like Do you let yourself? Do you distract? Do you run from it? And can you just love and accept yourself anyway? Have the grace and the compassion for wherever you find yourself. Because I promise you, I did not start out that way.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
Especially if we were the ones being not so nice. We had the inner critic instead of the intention to be
Yeah.
meaningful, meaningful and kind to ourselves.
Yeah. And I think too, like going back to what you said about distracting yourself. Like, do you distract yourself or do you let yourself like be in the moment with it? And I think with a lot of people, it's, the hustle of life where they're like, oh, I can't deal with it right now. I can't deal with it right now. But I promise you, if you take literally 10 seconds to just acknowledge it, it gets quieter. And it's almost like I like to use I think metaphor is the right word, but you have a friend that's across the room and they're waving at you and you're just ignoring them, and they're waving at you and you're ignoring them, and then eventually they're yelling your name, they're screaming, trying to get your attention. That's the same thing with anxiety. If you don't like acknowledge it, it's going to wave at you harder, it's going to scream at you harder until you say, okay, what's up?
I,
And like, what do you need?
I love that. I love that so much because it's like the shining the light on it. You hear this language a lot of times, but really it's just saying hi.
Yeah.
Do you remember that no matter what's going on in your body's not the enemy.
Mhm.
Your body loves you. And in this loving fashion, it's trying to send a signal. And the reason that you're hearing it, feeling it, experiencing it is because it wants to rise and move out of the way. It wants to become something else, but it won't do it on its own.
Mhm.
But when I start thinking of my body loving me with that, it was really hard to start blaming it for being overweight or in pain or having the headaches. It's like, what is it trying to tell me right now
Mhm.
that I haven't been listening to? The only reason it's getting louder and louder is because I've been ignoring it. Just like you
Mhm.
said, you're not seeing it out there, right? And the other piece that I really want to come back to is those I am statements, because the brain is so wicked smart, wicked smart. It's like,
I always say that. That's so funny. I literally said that yesterday. Like, oh, what are you, wicked smart?
it's so wicked smart. But whatever we put that comes after I am is calling into existence the very thing in the words and the language that's used.
Yeah.
So when we reiterate, I am anxious, I am stressed, I am this, we get more of it.
Yeah.
It amplifies. Whereas if we can get better at, I am well, I am calm, I am peaceful, we can take it, I'm wealthy, I'm a millionaire, all those places where we start to not feel safe in the body again, like that's not true, and find all the reasons why they're not working, we don't get to experience the magic of when we do and how it begins to shift our state as well. And so it's not only just affirmations. Sometimes we hear I ams as affirmations. And if you like that, why not use them? They can help. So
With
I
the
love
affirmations too, like when I first started out, it was kind of hard for me to say, I am loved, I am this, I am, And so what I started doing was saying, like, I am working on believing that I am.
yeah,
Right. Or I am working with my anxiety. Like instead of showing up, I still sometimes slip and say, like, yeah, I have anxiety, or I am anxiety, or I am anxious.
yeah,
But if I notice such a difference when I say, like, oh, I'm working with my anxiety today,
yeah. I'm
because
getting
then it's
better,
like a partnership
getting
and it
better
feels
every
so
day.
much
Yeah.
better.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying, like, it feels so much better, like when you're in a partnership with yourself and when you're in that relationship with yourself, rather than saying, like, oh, I'm anxious and that's it. It's
Yeah.
like I'm working on my anxiety today, you know?
I love that because, we think in terms of I am whole.
Mhm.
We think whole is somewhere we want to go get to, but we already are whole. It's the separation we've created in our mind that keeps us from the unification that's also available. And so when we start focusing on these things, we forget that what else is possible. So even if you say I'm anxiety, well, what else is possible?
Yeah.
And it's a gentle, soft way to talk better to ourselves, more effectively, kind, more genuine, more compassionate, because I promise you, anyone listening out there, you're not going to talk to your kids that way, right? Why are you excluded? You get to participate in this life, and it doesn't matter wherever you find yourself. There's
Mhm.
always a place that you can, I was going to say strive, but I don't really like that word. You can choose to be, right? And so it's about coming 1% better every single day. And so even that, I am working 1% more every day to love myself more. I wonder where this will lead. This is leading me to loving myself a little bit more today than yesterday. Like all these beautiful affirmations and confirmations that we don't have to be perfect. We don't
Yeah.
have to, we just don't have to be perfect.
And it doesn't have to take a day, it like allow yourself to understand that this is such a journey. It's a journey and things are not going to switch in a week. Like they might switch a little bit, but you're always on the train.
Yep.
You're always on the train of it. And that's what happens when you step into the self-development, personal healing journey is like it's a lifelong thing. It's not just something that you do for 2 months and then you're like, I'm healed. It's like it's a continuous thing but it's a beautiful thing. It's so amazing.
It's ever expansive, and I really like that. It's that daily practice, and try some things for a while, and try something else, and see where things lead you, because there's so many modalities that can welcome us home to who we are.
Mhm.
And we may not resonate with the first few or the first few times, but then something shifts and we get a different appreciation for the experience that we're having of ourselves in it. And I think that's where it just opens up all this possibility that didn't exist before. It's like the blinders come off and we get this whole 360-degree view where we've
Right?
been asleep,
Yeah,
right?
it's almost like your eyes finally open. You're like, whoa, this is
Yeah.
life. Life doesn't have to be like, people are always saying, like, well, it is what it is, and this is life. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. And it's like, this is life. This is life.
Yes,
Like,
absolutely.
so
Well,
cool.
where can people find you, and what do you have going on in the world right now?
Yeah, so I am on Facebook mainly. I have a Facebook group called the Om Breathwork Community. That's OM Breathwork Community. And then also facebook.com/the Jessica Rylee. I'm also on Instagram at It's Jessica Rylee. And then I also have a website, www.thejessicarylee.com. And then, yeah, right now I'm just offering one-on-one breathwork journeys. You message me, we kind of figure out what you are going through, what you're wanting to release, and then we go through a beautiful journey together. And I also have a breathwork membership. You get 2 breathwork sessions every single month, and then you also get a hot seat coaching call as well, because I also do a little bit of business on the side as well to help you really step into that leadership role that you are wanting to step into. So yeah, that's all
Oh,
me.
I love that so much. I'll be sure to make sure that the show notes have all those links for people to find you. And I like to end every one of these podcasts with a question and just an answer from your heart. So today, when we think of power, presence, prosperity, what does that mean to you?
That's a good question. It, I don't know if I could say what it means more as what it feels.
Yeah, that's good.
But going back to that embodied liberation, just absolute freedom from your ego mind, freedom in the body, freedom to choose to be whoever you want to be and do whatever you want in this life. I think that that's where the power comes from. That's where the presence comes from. And that's where the prosperity will start to develop is through that embodied liberation and really just giving yourself permission to go through all of that stuff to
Yeah.
come back home to yourself. I think, yeah, like really just coming back home to yourself would be my answer to that.
Yeah, I love that. That unapologetic expression, and yeah, there's nothing else to say. I think that's perfect. We'll end there, but thank you so much for being here. What a fun episode, and I look forward to everyone getting to know you.
Thank you so much. The conversations with you are always so good.
Thanks. I have so much fun with you as well. We could talk forever.
I
All
know.
right, bye. Till next week, guys. See you then.